Episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion Show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook on at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video. Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. I'm Gregory Harden II, and today I am here with State Delegate from Virginia's 50th District and candidate for Governor of Virginia, Lee Carter. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Really glad to have you on. I've been following you since you first got elected, and I was in college and in my dorm, and I was like, oh my God, that's kind of cool. A socialist flipped a red seat in a state that I remember as a kid being red. That's pretty interesting. So, yeah. Well, first question I have is, where are you from and where did you grow up?
Yeah. So I'm originally from this little tiny town called Elizabeth City, North Carolina. It's, population 19,000. It's the biggest thing for an hour in any given direction. I mean, it's got a Coast Guard base and a little tiny college, and not much else, right? And I grew up there because my dad was in the Coast Guard. Of course, moved around a lot, but I was born there, and then I moved back there when I was, I think, about 8 or 9, and ended up staying there until I was done with high school because my dad retired there. So, after that, I moved like one more time right before the end of my senior year of high school, but then joined the Marine Corps just because I was from a military family, and I always thought, I'd always been told that it's a way to do something good, but the government just kind of took 5 years of my life, and uh, you know. Let's just say this: the most commonly heard phrase on a military base is "my recruiter lied to me."
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of people out there that don't understand that, like, there's a pretty big class divide within the military, and a lot of enlisted folks in particular, especially the people who get out after one term, walk away from the experience thinking, man, the government really took that time from my life, and I'm never going to get that back. But one good thing, I mean, they taught me how to fix electronics. So after I got out of the Marine Corps, I ended up moving up to Northern Virginia and fixing cancer therapy equipment for a few years. And that's where I am now. So I live in Manassas, Virginia, and I represent the city of Manassas and parts of Western Prince William County.
Cool. Let's see. So, what made you want to run for the House of Delegates?
It was a very kind of Mr. Smith goes to Washington kind of thing. Of course, I didn't realize that Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is supposed to be a cautionary tale. But yeah, I mean, I got hurt at work in the summer of 2015. I got a pretty hard shock, an electric shock in one hand and out the other. Went across my heart, and thankfully didn't do any damage to my heart. But then, I think I got like one hand off before the other, and some of it went down my spine through my legs. And I messed my back up pretty bad. And I couldn't walk more than about 50 feet at a stretch for a little over 2 months. And when I finally got back up on my feet, I called my boss and I said, hey, I'm ready to go back to work. And they said, we have work, but we don't have any for you because the customer that you were contracting for doesn't want you on their job sites anymore. And so, I had a choice. I could either try to find a new job that, would run the risk of getting hurt again. Or I could, try to fix the problem so that this didn't happen to anyone else. And I chose the latter. And I went around to people that I knew that worked in politics, people that worked in the General Assembly. And I asked them, what are you going to do to fix this? What is your boss going to do to fix this? In the case, I was talking to staffers, and nobody had an answer. And, I even talked to one guy who worked for the state Democratic Party, and he said, we don't have any polling data on workers' comp.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I don't care if you have polling data or not. It's broken. Fix it.
Yeah.
And so I realized that, if this is going to get fixed, it's going to have to be someone that actually cares about the issue, who's personally in office. And so I decided to go ahead and run. And, what do you know? I was pissed off, and there were about 11,000 other pissed off people in my district.
That's cool. Yeah, I've heard so many all types of horror stories about people whenever they get hurt on the job and they have to do workers' comp, and it's not sufficient. What is it called? The money that they end up getting from it isn't sufficient, or it's hard to get the money from workers' comp, and all types of crazy stuff. Like that's a serious issue. Like I've known other people who have ran for office as a result of that type of a thing. I've known other people personally who have had issues with that. That's a big issue. First of all, I am surprised that there's no polling data on this, and secondly, I'm surprised that was someone's reaction whenever you talked about that.
Right.
That's like, what?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is, there's nobody in power that wants to touch it, because come to find out, I found out from firsthand experience, as soon as you put in a bill to make the workers' comp system better for the people it's supposed to protect, you have every corporate lobbyist in the state descending on your office, pissed off at you. So
yeah,
and with their checkbooks out, ready to find someone to run against you and fund them. Because I mean, literally every corporation has employees and therefore has to have workers' comp insurance, right? And so if you make the workers' comp system better, if you make it better for protecting people, it makes workers' comp insurance more expensive, and therefore literally every company has a vested interest in fighting against you to keep their workers' comp premiums down.
Yeah, it's something. So what made you want to run for governor?
It was kind of a similar story to the decision to go ahead and run for the House, right? I was asking around and trying to find someone who would carry a big message, who would, talk about the kinds of changes that Virginia needs, in a way that was, big enough to rise to the moment that we're in. And we've got these cascading crises between, the mishandling of the pandemic, which has caused, hundreds of thousands to lose their jobs, and therefore to lose their health insurance. And the candidates out there, I gave them plenty of time and plenty of warning. I said, if anyone out there comes out with a bold vision, then I won't have to run, but it just didn't happen. And so, I realized right around the end of the year that, again, if this was gonna change, then I was gonna have to be the one to change it. And so I decided to step forward and say, you know what, I'm running for governor. And I'm gonna run for governor on a platform of not taking a single dime from for-profit corporations or industry interest groups. I'm the only one that can say that. I'm gonna run on a platform of ending these massive corporate subsidies that Virginia's government has been handing out year after year after year. And we're gonna take that money and we're gonna put it into the hands of the people of Virginia directly. That money is gonna go towards covering people's COVID expenses. I don't care if it's $20 for a test or $200,000 for the ICU. If you had an out-of-pocket cost for COVID, a Governor Carter administration will cover that cost for you by the time those 4 years are up. And then, we're also going to take a lot of that money that we've been using for corporate subsidies, and we're going to use it to help people start worker cooperatives, so that when we rebuild the economy, when we put people back to work, we're not just begging Jeff Bezos to come in and pretty please rain some jobs down on us, right? We're actually building from the ground up in a way that is owned and operated by the people of Virginia for the people of Virginia. That way, the next crisis that comes along doesn't topple the whole house of cards again.
Sounds good. So tell me about your stance on healthcare. What legislation have you done since you've been in the legislature in reference to healthcare, and what would you like to see happen as governor?
Well, healthcare should be free at the point of use. That's one thing. That's probably like the biggest difference between being in the military and being in the civilian workforces. If you're in the military and you get hurt, you get sick, whatever, you go down to medical, you show them your ID card, and they fix you, and that's it, right? And then they handle everything else on the back end. It's all taken care of for you, and there's no reason why the U.S. government can do that for the millions of people in the military, but not for everyone else. Now, obviously, I would prefer to have it done at the federal level, right? Medicare for all is the best way to do it because the federal government is a currency issuing authority and they have that economy of scale. But if the feds aren't going to act, Virginia needs to. I look around at the world stage and I see the closest analog to Virginia is Austria, right? We have 8.5 million people. They have, I think, 8.6 million. Their GDP is roughly the same as ours. Their land mass is roughly the same as ours. They have a universal healthcare system and we don't, right? And, you look at that universal healthcare system that they have, it's one of the most expensive in Europe, but it's still 30% cheaper than what we pay per capita. And it covers everybody where ours doesn't. Right? So what are we paying that 30% more for? We're paying 30% more to have a system that leaves 400,000 Virginians without health insurance even before the pandemic, right? That leaves 1 million Virginians with health insurance, but it's too expensive to use. What kind of a system is that? It's no system at all, right? And so, I've been fighting for single payer healthcare, again, preferably at the federal level, but worst case scenario at the state level. Since I've been in office. And, I've been trying to inch us towards that every single chance that I can get. One of the first big victories was in 2019 when we expanded Medicaid. So that got about 300,000 Virginians onto health insurance that didn't have it before. But I've also, last year I introduced and passed legislation to cap insulin copays at $50 a month. So that people who have state regulated insurance aren't rationing their insulin anymore. Because, there were a lot of people that say, for example, they were on Medicare, but they have a supplemental plan, right? So Medicare runs out in like May or June, and the supplemental plan has an out-of-pocket deductible before it kicks in. So, they're paying $20 a month all the way through May, and then June comes along and their copay goes up to $600 or $700, right? That doesn't happen in Virginia anymore. Starting this year, that's $50, period. Right. So, that's just one example of the sort of thing that I've been able to pass in the legislature. And I look forward to using the bully pulpit as governor to fight for a state level single payer system so that we can be the first state in the union to say, if you need to see a doctor, you can see a doctor, period.
All right. I like that answer. Tell me about your stances on education.
Education is one of the areas where Virginia is most unequal. I mean, we have a long, terrible history when it comes to public education in this Commonwealth. In fact, the only governor to ever serve 2 terms was a segregationist who was best known for shutting down all public schools to avoid integrating them. Right. So, I mean, this is just an abysmal history, and we're not that far away from it today. We've got crumbling schools in communities of color, places like the city of Richmond, where we have stories all the time where, these schools where kids are supposed to spend 7, 8, 9 hours a day learning, and there's rats running around in the middle of occupied classrooms. There's black mold everywhere. There's, teachers have to bring buckets with them if it's going to rain. I mean, just horrifying conditions in these schools. And then you go to rural areas and the schools are crumbling there too, right? There's schools in Virginia where they just know, like, this is the crack that expands every year in the gym. And, it was 12 feet last year. Now it's 14 feet long, right? And so, we've got to work to decouple our school budgets from local property tax revenues, because that's where that inequality happens, right? Rich people live in a small handful of localities and their schools get funded really, really well. And for the rest of us, whether we're in low income rural communities or low income urban communities, our schools are falling the hell apart because we don't have the property tax base. So, the Commonwealth has got to step up. We've got to amend our Constitution to guarantee an equal education for all students. Right now it just says that we have to try. We've got to make sure that we actually put that guarantee in the Constitution. And the only way that we're going to get there is through teachers and parents coming together, organizing, and doing the sorts of things that we saw in states like Oklahoma and West Virginia, where the teachers just said, you know what, this is too bad. We're blowing the whistle. We're walking out. We're going to take this fight to the state house. So I've introduced a bill actually for this year to legalize teacher strikes so that they can do that. Once teachers are able to actually blow the whistle on those conditions and stand up and say that our students deserve more, then I think we're going to see more action from the state government to guarantee it.
All right. What do you want to do in order to enact criminal justice reform in Virginia as governor?
The United States incarcerates more people than any other country in history, right? And second place isn't even close. And so, we've got to step away from these, 1980s, 1990s, tough on crime, war on drugs policies that just destroy families and destroy communities and lock people up for decades for nothing, right? As governor, first of all, I'm going to fight legislatively to massively reduce the sentences of all nonviolent crimes, right? I'm also, while in the legislature, I've been fighting to legalize cannabis and to create an expungement program so that anyone who has a conviction for something that's now legal can get that expunged automatically, right? It's not up to the discretion of a judge, like it has to be done. But the big thing is, it looks like cannabis is going to be legalized. We're winning that fight. But now the question is, how do we legalize it, right? Do we let the big tobacco companies come in and buy up the entire market? Or do we do it in a way that's owned and operated by Virginians, particularly the people that have been most impacted by the war on drugs? So, my proposal has anti-monopoly provisions. It has provisions to where, licenses are handed out preferably to worker cooperatives. But I'm also proposing that every single penny of cannabis tax revenue go towards a reparations fund for Indigenous and Black Virginians, because Virginia's government has been complicit in some of the most atrocious crimes in this country's history, right? The genocide of Native Americans, the transatlantic slave trade, Jim Crow, redlining, the war on drugs, you name it. We've got to start making amends to these communities that have been harmed through all of those practices.
All right. I love that answer, especially that part about the reparations.
And I can tell you, one thing that I'll be able to do as governor that I can't as a legislator is use the power of clemency, right? So a promise that I can make is through a Governor Carter administration, right? Governors in Virginia are limited to a single term, right? So I can only talk about what I'm going to do in 4 years. But by the end of those 4 years, even if I have to pardon thousands of people individually, our prison population will be at least 30% lower when I leave than the day I'm sworn in.
All right. What will you do in order to protect workers' rights and further empower working people in Virginia?
This has been the biggest thing that I've been working on in the legislature. I am the poorest member of the General Assembly. You look at the General Assembly before about 2017, when me and a couple others came along, and it was all doctors, lawyers, realtors, and retirees, right? It was all people with $1 million+ in the bank. But now there's a small handful of us, right? There's a couple of reporters, there's a social worker, you got me, I'm an electronics repairman. So there's a handful of people that have more normal jobs that are more representative of the working class of Virginia. And because of that, we've seen a lot of progress on that. We were absolutely dead last for workers' rights. The current governor likes to brag about how we were number one in the country for business, but Oxfam ranked us 2 years in a row dead last, 50th out of 50 for workers' rights. We're 34th now, right? It's still not great,
Mm-hmm.
but we've got to make it easier for folks to unionize. I've been fighting to repeal the anti-worker right to work law. I've been fighting to legalize public sector strikes, starting with teachers. I've also been fighting to fix our workers' comp system, right? Because believe it or not, here in Virginia, it is still legal to fire someone for falling off a ladder. And the single biggest thing that I've done as a legislator to help workers is I've made it possible to have a worker cooperative, right? That was not a legally recognized type of business before, but now if you have at least 5 people working together towards a common purpose, you can start a business that is owned and operated by the workers, and it will be legally recognized.
Cool. Really good. What are you going to do in order to make housing more affordable and fight for people who rent?
Gentrification has been one of the biggest things that's been impacting my constituents. I mean, I live right at the outskirts of Northern Virginia, in the DC exurbs. And, when Amazon announced they were coming to Northern Virginia, the rent in my building went up 18% in 1 month, right? And we're an hour away by train, right? But it's because of that train that the rent went up so much. But I was out of all the candidates for governor, I'm the only one that opposed the Amazon deal, right? I'm the only one that opposed the Virginia government giving $70 million to Micron, because we can't keep cramming more and more people into the same handful of city centers, right? We can't keep cramming more and more companies in, because all that does is it jacks up the rent for everybody as those companies bring new workers in from Seattle and New York and Pennsylvania, right? So what we've got to do is, instead of continuing to turbocharge gentrification like this, we've got to make sure that we're, first of all, we're building an economic development system that focuses on the well-being of Virginians, not just on the number of jobs created. And when it comes to housing, we've got to roll back a lot of these laws that make it really, really easy for landlords in Virginia to evict people for no reason. I mean, we have one of the most landlord-friendly laws, landlord-tenant laws in the country. And that shows, because out of the 10 cities in America with the highest eviction rates, 5 of them are in Virginia,
Wow.
right? You've got Richmond, and then 4 out of the 7 cities in the Hampton Roads area. They're all in the top 10 list. So we have a real crisis here in Virginia, and we've got to have housing policy that includes just cause eviction laws, right? We've got to have state level rent control. We've got to have a tax on vacancy, so that these big corporate landlords can't just hold hundreds and hundreds of units open to jack the price up for the rest of them. There's all sorts of changes that we can make across the board to bring the cost of housing down, so that people can have more money in their pocket and live closer to where they work and spend more time with their kids and less time sitting in traffic. Like, there's so many follow-on effects to housing policy. It is unreal, the kinds of impacts that just bringing the cost of housing down can have.
All right. Last question I have here is, what kind of music do you listen to?
I listen to everything, as long as it's a good example of its genre. right? And I kind of I go through phases. You know, I'll have like 2, 3 weeks where all I want to listen to is classic country. I'm talking like 60s and 70s stuff, right? Um, Conway Twitty, right? But then, you know, I'll go through a phase where I want to listen to new metal, you know, the kind of stuff that I listened to when I was like 16, 17 years old.
Like Limp
And then I'll
Bizkit?
switch it up and I'll want to listen to bluegrass for a
Hmm.
while and then classical for a while. And I just, you know, I'm just constantly, I just kind of, it's like binge watching on Netflix, right? I'll binge on one musical genre until I get bored of it, and then I'll move on to the next one.
All right. So, were you ever a fan of Limp Bizkit?
Yeah, yeah. God, I remember when I was a kid, asking my grandparents to buy me chocolate starfish and hot dog flavored water when that came out. Oh man, that's something that I just said on video. Okay, probably going to get used against me. But yeah, no, I mean, I listened to that when I was a kid. Not so much anymore. But yeah, and I think there are a lot of bands from the late '90s that are having a comeback.
Yeah.
I think that we're kind of overdue for a Limp Bizkit reunion.
Yes, yes, we are. They've only released like one album, and it was like 10 years ago. That was the last time they released an album, was like 10 years ago. So like,
And clearly, it wasn't the right time for it because I don't
yeah.
remember hearing about it.
Yeah, like
They
it
didn't wait long enough.
yeah, because right now it's like 2019 was the 20-year anniversary of Significant Other, and then last year was the 20-year anniversary of Chocolate Starfish. They've been pretty much silent, haven't really done any interviews or anything, haven't released any music in like 6 or 7 years. So I don't know what they're doing. I'm really disappointed to have not heard from them in a long time. So yeah, but thank you so much for coming on. Where can we find you on social media, and what is your campaign website?
My campaign website is carterforvirginia.com. That's all one word, all spelled out. Carter for Virginia, FORVIRGINIA. On Twitter, I'm at Carter for VA. It looks like Carter Forva when you type it. But you know, the big thing that I want people to take away after listening to this is, you know, we are up against the very embodiment of the political establishment, right? In this primary, we're running against a former governor and the current lieutenant governor and 2 other members of the General Assembly. And then in the general election, it looks like the Republican is probably going to be a former Speaker of the House. Without taking any money from corporations, we are really, really up against Goliath here at every step of the process. So, you know, they've got the big money donors. Just about everybody else in the race has gotten single checks for more than $100,000. Whereas my campaign is fully funded by the people. We're 4 days into this now, and we've got almost 2,400 individual donors, which is far more than any other campaign at this point. So we've got the people, but they've got the money. So I need your help. Please go to carterforvirginia.com. There's a donate button and a volunteer button. You know, if you've got it like that, please click that donate button and kick in $20, $50, $100. But if you don't, you know, click the volunteer button and help us get the word out, right? This campaign is going to run on people that are talking to their friends, talking to their neighbors, talking to their coworkers, and saying, you know, on June 8th, there's a choice between 5 candidates on the Democratic side, right? You've got a multimillionaire, 3 lawyers, and this guy named Lee. And we really need people to show up and pull the lever for this guy named Lee. So please do whatever you can to get the word out. Once again, that's carterforvirginia.com, on Twitter at Carter4VA.
All right.